to your water bottles. Last tour, someone dropped something over there.
Oh.
So here you guys get your first view of the palace. Straight across over there.
Oh, yeah, duh.
Straight across over there is Cliff Palace.
Yep.
Keep looking, see how many cliff dwellings you can find.
Mm-hmm. Look at all the people up there.
Oh, up to
See it?
yeah.
It's a vertical wall built.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another one way back there.
Yeah, I see it. Wow.
So while you guys are looking, I'll keep talking about Richard Wetherell, who is actually, we're talking about the first European Americans to really put this place on the map. And it could have been somewhere around here. So we were in the mid-1800s that this area at Montezuma Valley was getting settled, and we had ranchers, miners, and loggers coming in. Well, one of the families was Benjamin Wetherell and his 5 kids, and they were from Ohio, I think, and they came out here, and they were Quakers. And Mr. Wetherell and the Wetherell family didn't have any animosity. They were non-violent people. And in the mid-1800s out here, we still had what unfortunately is called the Indian Wars going on. We still had people, well actually I know people whose grandma and grandpa were afraid of the marauding Native Americans. So we still had youths living their lives and not happy with the settlers coming in, and that's mid-1800s. And then this was Ute land. The Utes were living here. Well, the Wetherells as Quakers were friendly to the Utes, and so the Utes said, "Oh yeah, you can raise your cattle on our land." And so we had that Mancos River going way down at the end of this canyon. And we had the Wetherells ranging their cows all around in these canyons and climbing over. And one day in the winter, it's actually December 18th, 1888, Mr. Richard Wetherell and his cousin Charlie Mason were looking for cows. They probably came right around where we were in the snow, looked across, and saw the cows. And the youth had told them that there were sites up here, but they had seen a couple. The earliest documented photograph of Mesa Verde National Park is 1874, and that's William Henry Jackson. And he took a picture of what's called Square Tower House. We won't be going there. But why the Wetherells are important is because they were astounded, right? And they went, "We've got to go down in there." And Richard Wetherell actually, after he saw Cliff Palace, he was so charmed and so fascinated and so inspired that in the summers he was a ranching cowboy, and in the winters he started digging. He wasn't an archaeologist, he didn't have archaeological training, and what the early people did is they went into all of these, you can see sites everywhere, and they just started finding stuff and digging them and making collections. And Richard Wetherell tried to get the Smithsonian interested in one of his collections. They weren't interested. Tried to get the Museum of American History interested. They weren't interested. He wanted to sell them. At that point in time,
Isn't that weird? Nobody wanted them.
go out and find artifacts and sell them. Right?
Yeah.
So he eventually made 4 collections. 2 of those are at the Colorado Historical Museum in Denver, one's in Pennsylvania. And so the 1888, he discovers Cliff Palace here. Well, 1890, and he starts inviting people because there are, travelers from back east, and they would go down to the ranch in Mancus, and then they'd bring them up here, and they'd go on horseback in wagons. Teddy Roosevelt came, Willa Cather came, all kinds of people came. And it started trickling out through, society at the time, that there were amazing, dwellings here. And in 1891, a Swedish young man, Gustav Nordenskjöld, came. He spent the summer excavating. He was interesting. Why he's important is because he documented anything. Really, Wetherell documented, but he'd go over here, there's these many rooms, and you guys have this. And Nordenskjöld was the first scientific documenter, right? Okay, he took pictures, he took drawings, he said he made, and he got burials, and he examined skulls, blah, blah, blah. And he came out with a couple of carloads after his summer, couple of train loads, wagon loads, and they went to Durango, and he was going to take everything back to Europe. And he gets arrested in Durango because what? You're going to take all these things out of the country? Right? Well, they keep him in jail for a couple of days, and they, confiscate his wagon, his train cars full of stuff, and then they find out there are no laws. This is the late 1891, right? And so because of him, right, and people were outraged, so he got to take everything back to Europe, and right now his collection that he dug out of here is in Helsinki, Finland.
Oh, wow.
Right? So
Finland?
because of that, people were outraged. The United States was smaller, and news got around, and there were people back in New York and Washington, D.C., and they were like, this is our national heritage, this is not right. And so they started, a law was made, it's called the American Antiquities Act. And that law is in place today, and it says none of us, we cannot remove any artifacts. We can't we can pick them up off the ground, look at them, and put them back down, right? You can do that if you promise to do only that. That's what I do. But to take it, put it in your pocket, take it home, steal it, sell it, mail it, exhibit it, that is illegal. Even if you're at Gettysburg, right, and you find a spent shell casing. Anything on public lands that is made by human, it's illegal to remove that. So that American Antiquities Act started here. So then what happened is a couple of women, there is Lucy Peabody, which the Peabody name, she was from back east from New York City, and Virginia McClurg was from Colorado Springs, and she was part of the Colorado Historical Society. And women were very interested. A lot of women became activists around, these dwellings and these sites. And they said these need to be preserved. So we've got the American Antiquities Act, but we still can't just have anybody who wants coming here and just walking in them and touching them. You'll wreck them. You can see across the way, they'll fall apart anyway, right? So, and the more people that come in, and so they really started lobbying Congress, and Teddy Roosevelt came out, right? So it was 1906, under the urging of locals as well as these people from back east, that they declared this a national park in 1906. Okay, and it was the very first national park to be declared a national park on basis of the cultural heritage. We've got animals and geysers, and we have obviously very beautiful scenery as well. But the main reason that this became a national park was because of the cultural heritage. And the mission of the Park Service, and this will answer some of your questions, is to protect and preserve Okay, so there are some people, they want things to be rebuilt, but so we were at 1906, it became a park. The headquarters was down in Mankish. 1908, one of the first superintendents, and this is what you'll see if you go to Spruce Tree House, moved the headquarters up to the top of the mesa, and they built a road, you know, not the one we went on, but another one, and that was quite a deal. And in 1908, they hired Jesse Walter Fuchs, who was in the Smithsonian, and he became the first park archaeologist. And so see straight across there is where we'll be going next. And you know, we've been talking about all these underground houses, and now we're looking at these alcove dwellings. But in between the pit houses and the cliff dwellings, we have spikes built on top like this. And we'll be going there next. That one straight across was excavated by Jesse Walter Fuchs. And as I said, he was a park archaeologist, came from the Smithsonian from 1908 through 1920. And he did a lot of things which actually are now currently national park traditions. So he would go in and try to stabilize a place. Preserve means let's remove rubble, let's stabilize walls, let's not rebuild anything. So he made it be, let's not rebuild. We're not just, because we don't know what it was originally like. So let's just stabilize it, okay? But then the process of removing rubble and preserving, they found all kinds of stuff. He would bring all these things to his house, and then at night he'd invite all the visitors to come over to his house and look at what he had found. And his house had all kinds of artifacts in it. And so he moved away after 1920, and they decided to make a museum. And so it was because of him that there's now a museum here on the mesa over by Spruce Tree House. And like I said, I highly recommend that you go there. A lot of the work done there, the superintendence was by the Civilian Conservation Corps from the late 30s to the early 40s. But Fuchs also did another thing, because he was, you know, so inspired. I think people who stay and spend a lot of time here, they just, I mean, your mind gets blown, right? It's kind of incredible. But so he started giving campfire talks. And we still have the tradition of National Park Service campfire talks at all of the national parks now. And that also started here at Mesa Verde because of Jesse Walter Fuchs.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
Yeah, isn't that cool? So you can see this canyon you're looking down into is Cliff Canyon, and so we're going to get another view when we go over to Sun Temple. Like I said, don't drop anything over. But just remember, like when you're here, what you could see. When you're there, remember what you could see from here. And then from here, straight across, there's some walls. And you see those walls straight across? And then above that wall, you see the one straight square building with a tiny hole.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a good example of what we call a granary or a storage. So by this time, you know, we look at, well, the cliff dwellings are from 1100, 1200, 1300, but the mesa top sites are like 9, 10, 11, 9, 10, 11. So we've got people growing more than just corn. They've started trading. They've got beans, dry land adapted beans, and they've got squash. Okay, so by the time we get to the above ground pueblos, we've got not just corn, but we've also got beans and squash. And if you peek up here, we're gonna drive by these things, but you've got one dwelling there and another one up there, and there's actually even another one over there. And the one on top and those two were all excavated by Jesse Walter Fuchs, as well as Cliff Palace, and Nordenskjold also did Cliff Palace as well. So we have a couple of, you know, storylines. Some people say, oh, well, Mesa Verde, one of the tragedies of Mesa Verde is that you had early cowboy looters. Well, and I kind of like to defend Richard Weatherhill a little bit, because he tried his best. I mean, he made collections, he documented everything, he made maps. The map I passed around, he drew that map, right? So I don't think he was specifically a looter, but there were looters who did come in and take stuff, but all of Wetherell's collections are now in museums. Okay, well, people we call looters are people who take stuff and then sell them on the private market, and then, you know, they're in somebody's fancy house in Santa Fe. Like today, I mean,
Yes.
really, you know, it's kind of, I mean, I grew up here out in the West, and I mean, I had a Hopi elder when I was a little kid take me to the mesas, and we could pick up pottery, and you didn't think anything of it, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 50, 60 odd years ago. It was a different climate, you know. We kind of just, oh, you see, oh, look, that's a pretty piece of pottery, you know, and you put it in your pocket, and you got a little bowl of cool. Even now, if you go out to Dove Creek, so Anasazi, have ever you guys heard of Anasazi beans? Yeah, Anasazi beans, they're the, so if you go towards Moab from Cortez, you'll go by a place called Dove Creek, and it's adobe milling. Why they're called Anasazi beans is because even out there, I said we have the most artifacts around. We've got Hovenweep with towers, we've got Canyon of the Ancients, but farmers came in, they came in from Arkansas, and they'd start plowing their fields, and as they were plowing, they'd bring up sherds, but somebody, evidently, if you go to Dove Creek, it's somebody's uncle. Everybody has an uncle that found a bunch of beans in a pot and grew them, and those are the Anasazi beans, right? So they were, when we talk about that granary, you know, things were preserved, and the strain of Anasazi beans now originally did come from this area, right? And they, you know, who knows? Yeah.
Okay, Doc. How are you going to get to the granary? Are they coming down from the top, or are they
my
going up
question.
from the bottom?
Both. And there is, you know, I can't see them, so I can't point them out to you. There's little Moki, handheld Moki steps that you can see from here. And it says on the panel, I haven't ever been able to see them. I'm sorry, so I can't tell you. But so there's several ways. They made ladders, okay? And you're gonna climb ladders when you go to Clotalis. They made ladders. They carved niches in the rock, steps in the rock, so you could climb up the steps in the rock. And they put up notched